Hello everyone! What do you think? What language did Neanderthals speak, or did they have a language at all? The accumulated data on Neanderthals suggests that it is very likely they did have a language. Their hearing and speech apparatus could produce and perceive speech. Moreover, they shared the same version of the FOXP2 language gene with us. So if they had a language, what was it like? I'll explain this in more detail, but first subscribe and give a like. Let's start with how the language of Neanderthals might have sounded. Reconstruction of the Neanderthal vocal apparatus showed that they could pronounce most of the sounds we do. However, they might have had difficulty with vowels like a or u. This is also supported by the climate conditions in which Neanderthals lived. They lived in Europe. At that time, it was the coldest place inhabited by humans. Dry and cold air contributes to languages having more consonants. We don't know what Neanderthals talked about, and we probably never will. However, we can assume that they likely discussed everyday matters, coordinated their actions, and maintained social contacts. We can also suppose that their words were simpler than ours, having literal meanings without the figurative senses found in our languages. Creating metaphors and figurative meanings requires the ability to form new associations between different concepts. Neanderthals likely didn't have this ability. Their skull structure tells us this. Their skulls were more elongated compared to ours. This means that certain regions, such as the temporal pole and the parietal lobe, were smaller than in modern humans. The parietal lobe is where different types of information are integrated. Additionally, the ability to combine simple elements to form more complex structures is fundamental to grammar. This implies that their combinatorial abilities were weaker, and thus their grammar was simpler. The simplicity of their grammar is supported by two more pieces of evidence. First, their tools were much simpler than the tools of our ancestors. Just as creating sentences requires envisioning a hierarchical sequence of simple actions, making tools also requires this. Their tools were simpler in the sense that they required fewer combinations of simple actions to produce. Neanderthal culture did not change much over time. This static nature suggests that the knowledge of tool making was stored in long-term memory, indicating that their working memory resources were limited. The greater the resources of working memory, the more complex structures one can produce. This again suggests that their sentences were simpler than ours. As we know, Neanderthals buried their dead, which means they believed in an afterlife. This belief indicates that they were capable of mental time travel, imagining the future and recalling the past. Mental time travel is fundamental to one of the key features of our language, displacement. This is the ability to talk about things not present in the here and now. It also underpins another crucial feature of our language, recursion, the ability to produce long embedded sentences. Mental time travel requires resources from episodic memory. It is clear that Neanderthals had this ability, although it was probably less developed than in our ancestors. Thus, Neanderthal sentences were likely short and simple, focusing on persuasion and maintaining social bonds. Did Neanderthals have a single language or many? Considering that they lived in small groups and rarely interacted with other groups, it's likely that each group had its own distinct language. Goodbye, everyone.